let's talk about the furry comic The Eye of Ramalach. In it, we follow Ron Rudentoff, a raccoon whose archaeologist adventurer father has just passed away and left everything to him. Among those items is a journal detailing his father's final and unfinished adventure for a relic called the Eye of Ramalach. Using a compass disguised as a clock, he's able to get an expedition going to cross the ocean and go searching for the treasure. But Ron, you see, is a historical researcher, so he doesn't have any field experience. He does, however, have plenty of friends and benefactors that'll help him get there, all for their own various reasons. Friends like Ben. Ben is a magpie, but he may as well be a horn dog as he sleeps with just about any girl with a beak that he can get his hands on, but if she's not a bird, he's not interested. Wow, a slut and a racist. Way to go, Ben. He's always trying to be Ron's wingman and get him laid too, but with no success thanks to Ron's other friend, Alex. Alex is the girl that got away. Sort of. Ron courted her for a long time, proposed and got turned down, so there's some deep history there, and Ron is waiting for the day that she'll magically change her mind and agree to marry him. They're still friends with benefits. A lot of benefits. But waiting for her is sabotaging any future feminine prospects that he might have. Ron, my dude, it's not gonna happen. You gotta move on. Anyway, back to the treasure. What is the Eye of Ramalach? Turns out Ramalach is some sort of demon, and the Eye of Ramalach is the vessel that he's being held in, some sort of stone idol. The idol itself doesn't actually matter, as whoever touches it first becomes the new vessel for Ramalach and gains access to his unfathomable demonic powers. It's not really possession so much as it is Ron serving as the gateway for Ramalach to interact with the physical world. He manifests as a third eye on Ron's forehead and can seemingly come and go as he pleases. Ron can't use his magic, but Ramalach can be asked to do things. Now, let's put a pin in this. I don't want to give away the entire story. I do need to stop and talk about the style that the comic is presented in, though. Lore heavy would be an understatement. I am not joking when I say I took down 3 full pages of notes while reading this comic. This is not a read during your lunch break comic. I tried. I was there with my birdseed bars as a snack, and it just did not compute with me. This is not a read on your phone comic. This is a sit down with pencil and paper because you're gonna have some work to do sort of comic. Now, for the longest time, I thought this was to the comic's detriment. But then I remember people actually love stuff like this. People that enjoy games like Five Nights at Freddy's or Tunic. People that read books like House of Leaves. People love digging into things for extra lore, facts about the setting, or hidden connections between characters and places. The Eye of Ramalach was clearly written by someone with a knack for detail, a love for world building, and a serious eye for character development. No pun intended. The past in this comic is just as important as the present. There are names, dates, historical events, factions, both living and dead, shadow organizations, characters that are only mentioned once or twice in the comic's hundreds of pages before they make an appearance. There is a lot here that needs unraveling. You cannot pick it up and just read it and 100% understand what's going on. Oh, you might get the surface story, but all the twists and turns and extra details will fly right over your head if you're not paying attention. I'll give you one example so you can see what I mean. At the beginning of the comic, we're given a little bit of info about the governing body of the setting. The country of Fanfolia is ruled by a queen who appears to be about 25 years old, but she actually stopped aging about 50 years ago. This is because the apocalypse happened about 50 years ago, and she killed or sealed up a demon god and helped save the world at the cost of losing her husband, the king. She's not remarried since then. She specializes in healing magic and plant-growing magic, but at the cost that she doesn't so much heal someone's injuries as she does transfer them to herself. Thusly, she must maintain a strong and youthful body in order to endure whatever she takes from her patients. Also of note is that healing magic cannot cure infections or illnesses because those bacteria are living things and healing magic does not kill. She also invented the Silent Men, plant-based soldier golems that seek and usually destroy all sources of magic in the country, apart from herself, of course. She's the only big magic user in all of Fanfolia, and she likes to keep it that way because any returning demonic forces will be easier to spot and destroy if literally no one else is using magic. Selfish and overbearing, but effective. It's essentially modern-day Earth there, and other countries do have magic, especially the one that houses the Eye of Ramalach, the Burning Sands. So yeah, there's some technology civilization versus magic civilization going on here, but the Queen runs the technology civilization for herself. Now, all that aside, that was a single paragraph of information. All of that was scattered over hundreds of pages of comic, and we haven't even met this woman yet. In my notes, I built an entire character profile on this woman, and she is never shown until way later in the storyline. That is the level of detail and writing that you can come to expect in this comic. It really is just above and beyond. But you wouldn't notice that unless you were taking notes and paying attention anytime she's mentioned. And she's just one character. There's other stuff going on too. So before you even begin this comic, you need to ask yourself if you are part of the FNAF crowd or the House of Leaves crowd. Are you willing to work to get all the details of this story? If the answer is yes, you are in for a serious treat. There's a lot of world-building details, character connections, names, dates, factions. There's even entire conversations that take place in Spanish and French throughout the story. A quick use of Google Translate was enough to get me through those pages, but it was an interesting touch for folks that like to puzzle out everything that they're enjoying. So, story-heavy comic about treasure hunting, slain gods, immortal queens, and Ron's place in all this at the death of his super-famous father. It's great. There's a lot of action and adventure and treasure-seeking and sneaking around and more. And then, strangely enough, the comic sort of outgrows its original concept. The Eye of Ramalach for the longest time is about obtaining the Eye of Ramalach. And of course, Ron gets it. Why wouldn't he? I've already talked about that. But beyond that, the comic sort of loses its way. It took forever for me to think about how to describe it. Do you remember the original Yu-Gi-Oh series? Where Yami Yugi would literally go around just killing people if they lost to him at any game. Do you remember the original Yu Yu Hakusho, where Yusuke was literally a spirit detective? Emphasis on the detective bit. Those two shows, or mangas or whatever, gained wild popularity when they became about children's card games and shonen battle tournaments. They outgrew their original concepts by a country mile, and their roots are left buried in the pages of history. Nobody remembers what a psycho killer the Pharaoh was at the beginning, or how Yusuke had a handful of spirit detective tools that he literally never uses or mentions again in the story's runtime. Unfortunately, the Eye of Ramalach sort of falls into the same trap. Once the eye is obtained and Ramalach attaches himself to Ron's forehead, the sense of action and adventure sort of stops. Everyone that survives the initial adventure, and yes, there are character deaths, returns home, and, well, that's the end of that adventure. Life goes on. Ron returns to his job at the big important museum, opens a new exhibit with all the treasures that he's given or found, and his crew of friends continue with their lives. Obviously, Ramalach makes his life more complicated, but there is a caveat. Ramalach has to behave himself if he doesn't want to attract and be killed by the Silent Men. You remember the Queen's private forces. And Ron has to continue to navigate his life with a literal demon portal in the middle of his forehead. Beyond that, the comic basically outlives its own premise. It kind of devolves into a romantic comedy where Ron gets a new girlfriend, or two or three, much to Ben's surprise. Ben was so sure his raccoon buddy was a complete virgin when really he's more of a nice guys don't kiss and tell sort of person. While new characters do come back with them from the expedition, all sense of adventure is lost while we learn more about the people that helped fund the expedition, literal monsters that want to rejoin Ramalach, and any other demonic forces that they can find. But I'm not kidding. Dozens and dozens of pages are suddenly devoted to who is sleeping with who, what their life history is, going on dates, why or why not they make a good couple, etc., etc. The comic basically stops being about anything other than fan service and everyone's complicated love life. The Indiana Jones portion of the comic is over. It's time to move on to the friends portion, I guess. While the occasional complication arises because of Ramalach's presence, it takes pages and pages and pages to actually get there because the author got really good at drawing hot girls but isn't quite brave enough to draw a porno or something that isn't part of the Eye of Ramalach. I mean, I get it. I poked my beak into the comics Patreon. This person is making something to the tune of $500 a month drawing this comic. I wouldn't be ending my meal ticket either if I was in their shoes, but that's not what I'm here to judge the comic on. As of the making of this video, 320 some odd pages of comic, and this sounds damning to say, you could honestly trim about 50 pages out of this comic and be none the wiser. Keeping the plot relevant pages and keeping the story moving forward, it would honestly be much shorter, much better, and much more concise. Now, I love reading comics about hot characters hooking up, but that's not really what this comic was for. So your mileage may vary. Try to imagine watching Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, but then after the credits, Dr. Jones goes home, bangs a couple of coworkers, and just kind of keeps living life. You would wonder why the movie had just kept going, you know? The first act of this comic is high adventure, dense lore, great characters, and treasure hunting, and then when the treasure hunt is over, it becomes another comic entirely. I mean, it's not bad, it's just not what I was here for. So, should you read The Eye of Ramalach? I would say think on it first. Are you ready to do some work to unlock all of the lore, understand all the conversations, and so on? And when Ron retrieves the relic, are you ready to change the channel from adventure story to rom-com story? If the answer is yes, I'd say go for it. Despite my qualms with the direction that the comic has gone in, this is probably one of the better furry comics out there. You would be hard pressed to find better character development, better world building, and better dating and sex story arcs than this. The adventure, the treasure, the romance awaits you, so check it out.